produced by Threat Productions.
Welcome to Raise Your Self-Image, and I'm happy that you guys are allowing us in your living rooms today. And like always, to my left here is my man Craig Hall.
Hello there. Happy Black History Month. Glad to have y'all today. One thing I like to say is I'm so proud of our ancestors. I'm just thankful for the way that they paved, the doors that they opened for us. Like Medgar Evers, she was like the first African-American woman to go into space on the shuttle. You know, and she went and followed her dreams and her visions, Vern. Mm-hmm. But let me start off with our scripture today. In Chronicles 7:14, God say, if my people would turn from their wicked ways, then will he hear from heaven and heal our land.
All right.
And so if he heal our land,
okay,
you know, that means he's going to heal our children, he's going to heal our schools, he's going to heal our marriages. You know, and let me give you a definition for what he's really saying here. All right. One of the definitions is, teach them the right way to live, and he'll send rain upon our land. Now, when he's rain, the rain means that it's prosperity, you know, and everything is green and beautiful. And so we have to teach our children, and we have to remember about our ancestors and the way they paved for us to get to where we are today.
Right. Our last show, you know, you said that they're not teaching Black history in schools.
Yeah,
right?
They're not.
So if they're not teaching Black history in school, is Black History Month kind of like when they have to ride in the back of the bus? What do you think about that?
Well, you know, we ain't riding in the back of the bus now, and it's because we have came up, and it's because of the doors have been open for us. You know, we have a choice now, you know, and if you choose to ride in the back bus, that's on you. But
what Jackie Robinson, for instance,
yeah.
Did Jackie Robinson want to play in the Negro League, or did he want to play in the major leagues?
Of course not. He wanted to show everybody that he was better than all of those players.
Well, don't we want to show the world about who Black people are?
Oh, definitely.
And the contributions that they have made to America and the world? So if we continue to relegate, you know, our history to 1 month in a year, which is the shortest,
yeah,
you know, so therefore it's not allowing us to show the world who we truly are.
I understand. So what? We should be celebrating our Black history constantly, or you know?
What I'm saying is that having Black History Month doesn't change the status quo. It doesn't change the social order, because what it's saying to the world is that, you know, Black History Month for these people, you know, only matters to them.
Okay,
it doesn't matter to everybody else. Understand?
But it should, though, because we all in this together. Because if my neighbor is not doing well, then I'm not doing well, and it shouldn't be just about you know, the Black history. We are all in this pot together. We are all on this universe together, right. and so that's why we reach out to one another, because that's how God created us.
But see, Black history didn't start in 1619 when the first Africans came to the United States.
Okay.
African history started at the very dawn of human history. So therefore, we need to be telling the world who we are.
Yeah.
Understand that we are the original people on the planet Earth, and therefore everything should come from that position on down. But for some reason, we are happy to only see ourselves as slaves. People that came here in 1619 as indentured servants and eventually became institutionalized, you know, about 40 years later. So to me, what Black History Month tells everybody is that, you know, we're still second-class citizens, that we still ain't got the freedom and the rights that other groups have, and our history is not as important as other groups.
Well, why do you think that our people think like that? Because our ancestors fought so hard.
Because we have no power. But here we go. We're going to show a documentary on Medgar Evers. Medgar Evers was a great civil rights leader, and if you don't know about him, you would really appreciate some of the work that he has done. So relax, sit back, and check out Odds on the Prize.
There is no state with a record that approaches that of Mississippi in inhumanity, murder, brutality, and racial hatred. It is absolutely at the bottom of the list.
In 1964, the state of Mississippi called it an invasion. Civil rights workers called it Freedom Summer. To change Mississippi and the country, they would risk beatings, arrest, and their lives.
Y'all know what my child was doing? He was trying for us all to make a better living. And he had two fellas from New York, had their own home and everything, didn't have nothing to worry. But they come here to help us. Did y'all know they come here to help us? They died for us.
I know the one thing we did right was the day we started to fight. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on, hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on.
People like myself was born on this river. I love the land. It's the Delta. And to me, it's now a challenge, it's history, it's everything of what black people is all about. We came up out of slavery. And this is where we acted it out, I suppose. All of the work, all of the hard work, and all that. But we put in our blood, sweat, and tears, and we love the land. This is Mississippi.
I've lived in this Delta all my life. My parents before me, my grandparents. I've hunted and fished this land since I was a child. This land is composed of two different cultures, a white culture and a colored culture, and I've lived close to them all my life. But I'm told now that we've mistreated them and that we must change, and these changes are coming faster than I expected, and I'm required to make decisions on a basis of a new way of thinking, and it's difficult. It's difficult for me, it's difficult for all Southerners.
I was born in Mississippi, in the United States, and I'm the product of my heredity and education and the society in which I was raised. And I have a vested interest in that society, and I, along with 1 million other white Mississippians, will do everything in our power to protect that vested interest. It's just as simple as that.
In 1954, the Citizens Council was established in the Delta, the northwest section of the state, where blacks outnumbered whites. The council's purpose, to preserve white political power by opposing integration. Council chapters soon spread across the state.
Within 4 years, the Citizens Council was powerful enough that in the election of 1959, it threw its support openly and actively behind the candidacy of a damage suit lawyer named Ross Barnett, not one of the world's most successful politicians up to then, and saw him elected over a supposed moderate who was himself a segregationist, but with a quieter voice than Ross Barnett. And from 1959 until 1963, in the Barnett administration, the Citizens Council was the state, and the state effectively on matters racial was the Citizens Council.
Bankers, politicians, and owners of businesses joined the Citizens Councils throughout the South. They punished people who supported integration or black voting rights by foreclosing mortgages, firing workers or refusing loans to farmers. And they used their influence to push through laws that would ensure continued white domination.
It's primarily a struggle for power. And I think we would be stupid indeed if we failed to see where the consequences of a supine surrender on our part would lead.
At the center of Mississippi's struggle for power was the black vote. In some counties, blacks outnumbered whites 4-1. In 1962, in many counties, no blacks were registered.
There's a big psychological, gap to overcome. There's what a lot of people call a psychology of fear on the part of most of the Negroes. They're afraid of losing their jobs. They've been brainwashed. They think that somehow all of this is the business of the white man, and it's not something that they're supposed to be doing.
26-year-old Bob Moses came to Mississippi at the request of Amzie Moore, an NAACP leader. Moses and other SNCC organizers opened offices throughout the state to recruit local Mississippians.
I was asked would I join the SNCC, which was Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and I said yes. And they said, well, what do I have to do? They said, just try to encourage people to go and try to register, go over to the courthouse. And that was my start of going around here to my neighbors and friends and asking them, would they come and go to the courthouse and try to register to vote. People were being put off the plantations. People were threatened. Folks was put in jail just because we wanted people to try to register to vote.
Some attempting to register had even been murdered to stop black political activity. And the state passed new voting laws to make registration more difficult.
On this side, now right here you interpret. In other words, you tell what it means. Just write your meaning, your understanding of it.
Registering to vote at that time meant that you filled out a 22-question questionnaire. One of the questions was, interpret any of the 286 sections of the Mississippi Constitution to the satisfaction of the registrar. Now, you have to bear in mind that some of those registrars couldn't read or write, but that didn't matter. They could still determine who should be registered if that person happened to be black, because all whites who attempted to register were registered.
As the struggle for voting rights escalated in the Delta, tension was building in Jackson, the state capital, and the last stop of the Freedom Rides in 1961. A leader in Jackson and throughout the state was Medgar Evers, NAACP State Field Secretary. Evers had supported James Meredith during the battle to integrate the University of Mississippi. For 10 years, he had traveled the state, fighting for racial justice, and now helped organize the NAACP boycott of downtown stores.
Don't shop for anything on Capitol Street. Let's let the merchants down on Capitol Street feel the economic pinch. Let me say this to you. I had one merchant to call me, and he said, I want you to know that I've talked to my national office today, and they want me to tell you that we don't need nigger business. These are stores that help to support the White Citizens Council, the council that is dedicated to keeping you and I second-class citizens. Now, finally, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be demonstrating here until freedom comes to Negroes here in Jackson, Mississippi.
In June 1963, students in Jackson poured out of their schools to protest the beatings and arrest of demonstrators in downtown sit-ins. In response, Jackson officials put police and firemen on 24-hour alert, with orders to contain the demonstrators.
Hello! Did you hear me?
Hundreds were arrested. Mayor Allen Thompson announced that Jackson could handle 10,000 if necessary. The attitude of Jackson City officials was another reminder that blacks in Mississippi would have no real power until they had the power to elect those who governed them.
If you are not a registered voter, remember this one thing, that Allen Thompson got in the mayor's office by the majority of the folk who were qualified to vote and voted on the day that he was elected. Ross Barnett got in office because he was elected by the majority of the folk who were qualified to vote and voted on the day that he was elected. And if you don't like this thing, let's get ready to change it.
Demonstrators were not backing down, and many were being injured. For Medgar Evers, the situation grew more dangerous with every passing day.
It was simply in the air. You knew that something was going to happen, and the logical person for it to happen to was Medgar. It certainly brought us closer during that time. As a matter of fact, we didn't talk. We didn't have to. We communicated without words. It was a touch, it was a look, it was holding each other, it was music playing, and I used to try to reassure him and tell him, nothing's going to happen to you, the FBI is here, laugh. Everybody knows you, you're in the press, they wouldn't dare do anything to you.
On June 11th, 1963, Myrlie Evers watched at home as President John Kennedy made his strongest speech on civil rights.
It is not enough to pin the blame on others, to say this is a problem of one section of the country or another, or deplore the facts that we face. A great change is at hand, and our task, our obligation, is to make that revolution, that change, peaceful and constructive for all. Those who do nothing are inviting shame as well as violence. Those who act boldly are recognizing right as well as reality.
Late that night he came home. The children were still up. I was asleep across the bed, and we heard the motor of the car coming in and pulling into the driveway. We heard him get out of the car and the car door slam. And in that same instance, we heard the loud gunfire. The children fell to the floor as he had taught them to do. I made a run for the front door, turned on the light, and there he was. The force of the bullet had pushed him forward, as I understand. And the strong man that he was, he had his keys in his hand and had pulled his body around the rest of the way to the door. There he lay, and I screamed, and people came out. Our next door neighbor fired a gun, as he said, to try to frighten anyone away. And I knew then that that was it.
Medgar Evers had been shot in the back by a single round from a high-powered rifle. The one fingerprint found on the weapon belonged to Byron de la Beckwith, a member of the Citizens Council in Greenwood, Mississippi. Medgar Evers, 37 years old, died 1 hour later.
When Medgar was felled by that shot, and I rushed out, and so I'm lying there, and people from the neighborhood began to gather. There were also some whose color happened to have been white. I don't think I have ever hated as much in my life as I did at that particular moment with anyone who had white skin. I screamed at the neighbors, and when the police finally got there, I told them that they had killed Medgar. And I can recall wanting so much to have a machine gun or something in my hands and just stand there and mow them all down. I was just, I can't explain the depth of my hatred at that point.
We view this as a cold, brutal, deliberate killing in a savage, uncivilized state. The most savage, the most uncivilized state in the entire 50 states. There is no state with a record that approaches that of Mississippi in inhumanity, murder, brutality, and racial hatred. It is absolutely at the bottom of the list.
In Jackson, Mississippi, in 1963, there lived a man who was brave. He fought for freedom all of his life, but they laid Medgar Evers in his grave.
On the day that Medgar was funeral, I mean, there was violence. I mean, there was no way to predict it. There was a different element of people who had never participated in the movement before. The guys off the street who were just angry, you know, who that at that time is we had very little contact with in the Jackson area. We had mostly worked in through churches. We had worked through students, young people, and then just people in general, you know. The street people we had not really worked with as well because they didn't want to have anything to do with it because they always felt that they could not cope with the nonviolence. Not that they disagreed with what the movement, it's just that the tactics that were used. You know, on that particular day, that group of people decided to speak out. The police department and others came there. They actually antagonized the people. They were there in full battalion gear with the right arm on and guns, and they were being pretty rough with the people on the street. And the people just said, we're not going to take that. This is a funeral of our leader, and here they are, you know, harassing us, and the white folk killed them.
Shots had already been fired when John Doerr, a Justice Department attorney, stepped between the crowds and the police. With the help of Dave Dennis and others, Doerr convinced both sides to back off. The demonstrators went home. Medgar Evers was buried in Arlington Cemetery with full military honors. No one was ever convicted of his murder. The assassination of Medgar was national attention on a state which seemed at war with half of its own citizens. As anger grew, so did a concern that Mississippi could never be made to change from within. Civil rights leaders and sympathetic whites traveled to the South to see firsthand the state called the closed society.
Any doubts we had about the desirability of coming down before we came have been removed of what we've seen since we've been here. Because what we've discovered is that the people who run Mississippi today can only do so by force. They cannot allow free election in Mississippi because if they did, they wouldn't run Mississippi. And as we go around Mississippi and are arrested and beaten and charged with miscellaneous and very imaginative traffic violations that don't occur and threatened and told to leave, we understand why the people asked us to come down here, because inside Mississippi the rule of force is so hard on them that they can't shake the oath. But when we leave Mississippi, we'll tell what we've found, and the people of the United States aren't going to allow this to go on forever.
Movement leaders debated how to keep national attention on Mississippi. In June 1964, Bob Moses announced Freedom Summer.
We hope to send into Mississippi this summer upwards of 1,000 teachers, ministers, lawyers, and students from all around the country who will engage in what we're calling freedom schools, community center programs, voter registration activity, research work, work in the white.
Because of time constraints, we cannot show the video any further, but we'd like to make a few points before we go off the air today. It's really sad, the relationship between black and white people. Black people have suffered a great deal,
yes,
under European and white exploitation and domination. But we have to understand that people have the capacity to change. And with the capacity to change, we can change the world.
yes,
And we can also change the people who enslaved us. Understand what I'm saying?
I agree with you, man. What touches me the most as we come to a close is how our people suffered, and they fought for us to have freedom to go out and have what job we want to have, to ride wherever we want to ride on the bus. That's what they fought for, freedom to go and have whatever you want, to have the dreams and visions and to achieve those dreams. And that's why the name of our show is to raise your self-image. Because if you raise your self-image, you can do whatever you want, but you got to have a vision.
That's right.
And you got to fight for what you want.
Right. And like we were saying before, there are white countries, that don't have the freedoms that black people have in this country. There are brown countries, that don't have the type of freedoms that we have in this country.
Yeah.
This is the only country where you can be born poor,
come on,
and die rich.
Say that.
Again, this is the only country that you can be born poor and die rich if you're willing to do the hard work.
And that's a choice. And like this one phrase I read, it says 10% of what happens to us in the world, 10% of it is from it's going to be life, and 90% of it is of what we think.
So just remember, guys, if you can master the culture, you can conquer the world.
All right, now
Peace
raise
out.
your self-image. Peace. Happy Black History Month.